Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is arguably one of the best games on the PS5 that I have had the pleasure of playing. It is an absolutely fantastic retelling of the second half of the game, and is also just really fun to play. However, upon coming into this game and revisiting this part of the story, I started to sort of come to realize that a certain aspect of Final Fantasy VII's theming is maybe a little bit, I guess, misguided is the way to put it. That, of course, being the way that Mako is sort of a stand-in for nuclear power. So, on the surface, based on just some of the basic dialogue and sort of the way Mako works, it seems like it'd be more analogous to fossil fuels. Many environmental activists often say that fossil fuels are, quote, killing the planet. However, if you look at some of the elements that are presented, such as having Mako reactors, or the concept of Mako poisoning, it draws a lot of close similarities to how nuclear behaves. Way more so than coal. That, combined with the Corel arc being about a coal mining town that essentially was destroyed with the advent of Mako, you start to pick up on that a little bit more. And I'm not the only person to have pointed that out. Rachael Hutchinson, a professor of literature at the University of Delaware, published a paper on the topic, and while that paper focuses a little bit more on sort of the cultural aspect of how that story would come to be, I'm going to focus a little more on just kind of clearing up some misconceptions that people might have about nuclear power. So first, let's establish some of the facts about nuclear power. The first question is, what is the importance of nuclear power to begin with? So, obviously there is a lot of concern about climate change right now, and when you look at the sources of global emissions, electricity generation amounts to about a quarter of that. Another quarter is due to transportation, about half of which is cars, because of course it is. And so a source for a significantly lower emission alternative becomes fairly important. And in the case of nuclear, it is actually fairly clean. Nuclear power produces a little under 70 times less carbon dioxide than coal, and around 40 times less than natural gas. And so by looking at it, it's fairly obvious that in terms of emissions, this is a viable option. But why this rather than, say, wind or solar? And the reason for that is essentially the generative capacity of nuclear is significantly better than pretty much all renewable sources of energy. Renewables can have their place, but when you look at, say, solar, a solar farm is only generating at maximum capacity around 25% of the year. Compare that to nuclear, which tends to have performance in the 90s. A nuclear power plant is producing electricity at the maximum capacity the vast majority of the year. In fact, it is the most efficient source of power we have. That is the major reason why nuclear is an important thing to talk about and something to consider. It is not just clean, but also the best option we have to meet the demands for electricity that our society uses. However, what you might sometimes notice is that many environmental activists tend to oppose nuclear power. In fact, the organization Greenpeace is notorious for its opposition to nuclear power. Although their article on the topic includes absolutely no data or links to outside sources, which is never a good sign when you're trying to make an argument like that. It is not a good sign. And furthermore, when you look at some of their demonstrations, like this one from 2022, you start to see that they don't quite have the fullest understanding of nuclear either, as their depiction of nuclear waste as a green flowing ooze, while a common idea in popular culture, is completely divorced from reality. Though it is probably worth noting that the reason that Mako probably has that light, glowing green color is because of this cultural idea. So, what does nuclear waste actually look like? Well, the first thing to note is that uranium is a solid at room temperature. It has a melting point of 1132 degrees Celsius. That's over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not a liquid. Let's establish that first. What nuclear fuel is are essentially these long cylindrical rods which are filled with tiny pellets of radioactive material. And due to this, disposal generally just involves digging a very deep hole and putting it in there. That is frequently all we need to do for safe storage. There is no risk of it breaking and getting into our water supply because, as I mentioned before, it's not a liquid. And on top of that, there are actually technologies to recycle spent nuclear fuel, as a spent fuel rod is still 90% usable uranium. So there are solutions to handling nuclear waste. And if you want to learn more about this particular topic and how we dispose of and reuse nuclear waste, I'm going to link a video by the YouTuber Kyle Hill that goes into much more detail on this topic. However, for us, we're going to move on to another reason that activists tend to oppose nuclear power, and that is the nuclear accidents. Without looking it up, how many accidents would you guess there have been since the invention of nuclear power? 100? 300? 1,000? 3. And sometimes people don't even mention the first one. So let's talk about those particular accidents. The first one is the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania. This one occurred in 1979 and was due to a malfunction in the cooling system, which caused one of the reactor cores to melt. And this one is frequently left off the list of nuclear accidents because study after study has concluded that there have been no adverse health effects related to this particular accident. However, when we move to our next accident, this is arguably the most severe of those particular accidents, that being the Chernobyl incident in 1986. And while it was the worst nuclear accident in recorded history, as of 2011, the site of the accident has actually been deemed safe to visit from a radiation perspective, although it's still arguably dangerous to go to due to the fact that it's now been overrun by wildlife and the fact that there are structural faults in the abandoned reactor. It's also worth mentioning that that particular style of reactor is no longer produced, and the 8 remaining ones were all retrofitted following the accident to prevent a similar meltdown. And the final accident was the Fukushima accident in 2011. And this one was, a just string of bad luck and a number of really questionable decisions. You know, it would be crazy if, say, the company that was running the power plant received multiple warnings from outside agencies telling them that their particular plant was unsafe and had particular issues that needed to be addressed. That would be kind of crazy. In this particular case, it was not anything to do with the design of the reactor, but similar to 3 Mile Island, a problem with the cooling system. The cooling system was actually being run by a series of diesel generators in the event all the reactors shut down. And they decided to place them underground. And when the tsunami hit and the plant flooded, they went out, causing a meltdown. Which, how can you be that stupid? Everything about the Fukushima plant is wildly stupid. It should not have been there ever. It should have been built significantly more inland. That being said, this accident was still not that particularly deadly. The earthquake and tsunami killed a lot of people, but the accident itself has only had 1 confirmed death, and that was in 2018. So all things considered, similar to Chernobyl, it's just not as big a deal as some try to make it out to be. And similar to the topic of nuclear waste, if you want a bit of a deeper, more in-depth explanation to the particular cases of Chernobyl and Fukushima, I'm going to link a video by the YouTuber Adam Something, which goes into that exact topic. But with that, that's basically the main thrust of what I wanted to talk about. When I was playing through the game, I noticed this game is definitely very anti-nuclear, and I've now been reminded of that. So let's, make a video of that to, 1, have a reason to talk about Final Fantasy VII, and 2, just to start getting back into the rhythm of making content, because I've been kind of slacking on that this year, so I'm trying to get back into things. And also the other videos I have planned, I might have just ordered the costumes today, so they're not going to be here for a while, so I needed something to fill the gap. But with that, I think that covers everything. I hope you enjoyed this video, and with that, I'll see you guys.